I was recently hired by an eccentric billionaire to build a big Batman LED light. So in this video, I'll show you exactly how I did it.
This is the back piece, so the back panel of the whole thing here.
Kicking off today's Batman-inspired build, I'm going to begin by showing you how I actually made this light with leftover scrap wood I had laying around my shop. So if you're a fan of the legendary Cape Crusader, then put up your feet and grab some popcorn because we're jumping right into the action. If you're a child of the 80s and 90s, you already know who the best live-action Batman of all time is. That's right, Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, starring Michael Keaton as the masked vigilante himself. I owned the VHS tape version of Batman back in the day, and I watched that movie so much, the VHS sleeve cover was literally falling apart. I'll forever have that giant Batman logo designed by artist Anton Furst engraved into my memory. It's considered one of the most iconic and recognizable symbols of all time. So it's no wonder I can't shake that image out of my head. But it truly was that VHS box art logo of the Batman symbol that inspired the design of this Batman light. When looking at the Batman symbol, it appears as though the bat is popping out of the background. So to accomplish this, I programmed my CNC to cut out the oval-shaped background. Oh, did I mention that all of this was scrap wood that I'm using? The first thing I did was drill 4 holes in what is going to be the background of this light. I'll be using these 4 holes to hold the standoffs that are going to be needed for this light to work. These standoffs are what's going to allow the bat symbol to actually hover off the background and give the illusion as though the bat is popping out of the light. If I were to do these standoffs again, I would probably do them a little bit differently. I wouldn't make it so they go all the way through the background, that's for sure. With the standoffs installed, we're going to move on to cutting out the bat symbol itself. This is just one of the many reasons why I love my CNC. I was able to upload my design into the computer and add all my tracks for my LED lights, and really just let the CNC do all the heavy lifting for me. So when cutting out most designs on the CNC, I recommend using supports to make sure your piece doesn't come completely loose while the CNC is running. If you don't have the proper supports, your piece is going to come loose, it's going to get dragged around, and it's going to get all chewed up. I know this through personal experience, and it really puts a damper on your day. So now with all the pieces cut out, I moved on to cleaning up all the edges. When using the CNC with the 1/4-inch upcut bit, it tends to pull the veneer of the plywood, which creates a lot of burrs, splinters, and really just unwanted things. So I like to clean all that stuff up before moving on with any CNC-based project. So here I took a piece of 80 grit sandpaper, and I just went and cleaned up all the edges of the pieces that I've been working on. With all the edges cleaned up to my liking, I moved on to cleaning out the LED track carved in by my CNC. In order to wire this light up, the bat symbol actually has to be removable. So I had to get a little bit creative to make sure that this thing was able to hold itself tight and to come apart nice and easy. So to do that, I decided to add some magnets to the back of the bat symbol. These magnets are going to attract to the metal standoffs that I added previously to the background of this light. I probably could have done this a few different ways, but just like Batman's utility belt, this thing's packed with all kinds of surprises. These magnets worked out really well, and I will most certainly be incorporating them into future builds.
You should be able to line up the magnet, and the magnets will hold this thing down. So now it'll be like stuck. I like it.
While I was making this light, I found myself wishing I had my own utility belt. This belt would hold all of my smaller, and yet still important woodworking tools. Instead of a grappling hook, I'd have my tape measure. Instead of some batarangs, I'd have a square. Instead of a rebreather, I'd have a dust mask. Instead of some glue goblets, I'd just have a glue bottle. I was unaware Batman even carried some of these items until I did a quick Google search on, what does Batman actually carry in his utility belt? I may have to come back to this woodworking utility belt idea later though. In order to create the depth for this light, I decided to use some bending plywood that would be easier to form the desired shape that I needed. Turns out, bending plywood is not as flexible as I thought it would be, given that bending is in the name. Around the wider curves, it did great, but as you'll see later, when I form it around the bat's tighter curves, it took a little bit more effort to make it work. I've used bending plywood on bigger projects, but I've never used it on a more detailed project like this light. So I was looking forward to using it on a passion project where I could play around with it a little bit more. With the bending plywood pieces cut to size for the background, I moved on to attaching it with some glue and pin nails. Lots of pin nails. I wasn't super concerned about using a ton of pin nails on this project because I knew that I was going to be covering it up with many layers of Bondo and paint, which you'll get to see later on in the video, and you definitely don't want to miss that because it's what really makes this piece shine, figuratively and literally. It honestly makes me want to have a pro paint job on every single project of mine. With the bending plywood attached, I was able to do a quick dry fit to see how this light was actually going to start turning out. And I have to say, I'm pretty excited with how it's all coming together. Now we get to jump into the part that makes this an actual light.
You want to see this bad boy light up?
I could really just play with LED lights all day and not ever get bored.
Yeah. That works really well. Let's take it out of here. Yes, I could read some instructions. What a wonderful set of instructions. Use scissors to cut at a cutting. What does that even mean? Perfect. Okay. I got it.
When I was looking around to figure out what kind of LED lights I wanted to use for this project, it was actually my buddy, Andy, who paints the light later on in the video, who recommended this particular brand. He said that these lights would be perfect for this light build because they're super bright, really flexible, and you can cut them to length. And being able to cut these LEDs to a specific length is essential for this project because you'll need 2 different custom length pieces to make this light work as intended. These LED lights come in all kinds of different colors. But of course, I went with yellow. This yellow LED light is going to fill the oval-shaped background, which is going to illuminate the bat silhouette that much more, giving us that iconic Batman symbol that we're going for. These LED lights require an AC to DC converter. The power from your house is going to be an AC, so these converters are going to take your normal 120 outlet power down to a 12-volt DC power.
2 or 3 wires. Who knows? Let's see. 2 wires. Okay, that's good.
It's all a little bit technical when it comes to the power source of your LEDs, but all you really have to do is make sure you buy the correct power source.
I'm trying to make sure these lights still work without hurting myself. I never took one of these apart before. Those are little tiny wires in there. I've never seen wires that small. If you hook them up backwards, they just don't work. I'm going red is black. Red's probably hot. Now we gotta switch.
If you don't have the correct power source, you will fry the entire line of LED lights, and no one wants to do that. With that being said, I have everything I'm using in today's build, minus the scrap wood, linked down in the description below. With the first LED lights cut to length and fit into place, I moved on to adding an on-off switch to this light. Adding this on and off switch was a little bit nerve-wracking because I had to cut the original plug off of my power source for my LEDs. So if I wasn't able to wire this switch up correctly, then my LEDs wouldn't work. I've added a few switches to projects in the past, and most of the time it's pretty self-explanatory. You just kind of match the colors, and the wires go back together, and everything works. But typically it's a game of playing around with it until it eventually works for you. With the switch attached, I was eager to test it out and see how the light illuminated the whole bat symbol.
You know, if I put like a 2-inch wall, it's gonna touch the bottom and it's gonna hide all the light. So we're gonna try a couple sizes of tape and see what it does to the light and see if it makes it better or worse. And those magnets, dude, that worked great. You can hear it like lock on. I like magnets and they seem to hold very well.
After a successful test of the LED light and switch, I moved on to adding a trim piece around the border and to the bat symbol. This trim piece is going to help control any light spill and create shadows and define the light to where I want it to be. To determine how thick I wanted the trim piece to be, I used blue painter's tape to test it out.
Just get some blue tape on it. It'll be fine.
It's a uniform thickness, so at least it's gonna give me an idea if this is gonna be too thick of a Batman or too thin.
Blue painter's tape is essential to have around the shop. I find myself using it for anything and everything other than its intended purpose, including the occasional Band-Aid. Blue painter's tape could almost replace a few items from Batman's utility belt. After adding the blue painter's tape to the Batman symbol, I went ahead and added a second LED strip to the border of the bat light. Adding another LED light to the border is going to add more light to the background, which is going to make the bat symbol pop that much more. In order to add a second LED light, I had to add a wire to connect the LEDs together. I'm not the greatest at soldering, but from what experience I do have, you typically want the wires to be hot and to melt the solder, not the soldering iron to melt the solder. In order to attach this wire, I had to expose the contacts of these LED lights. Be careful. If you cut too far and you hit the lights, you're going to kill that LED, and you're going to have a nice dead spot right in the middle of your LED strip.
Problem is, LEDs have a positive and a negative. The picture shows the bottom being positive, so we're going to go with that. So that would be the neutral side, and this is smooth, so that's the positive side.
After a few unsuccessful attempts at soldering these wires together, I was finally able to get the solder to stick, locking these two together and making them one. With all the soldering complete, all that really was left was to test it out and make sure my connections were done correctly. Now that we know the light works, I'm going to add my silicone caps to cover all my connections. When attaching your silicone caps to cover up all your connections, make sure you take extra special care. As you can see, where my soldering joints decided to come undone, and the one piece now has become two. I'm pretty sure when I was soldering the first wire onto the LED lights, I melted the LED light itself, and that's what came loose, and not the solder. But I'm not 100% sure, so with the second one, I took a little bit extra care and made sure I didn't apply too much heat. With all the wiring complete, we're going to do one last test fit to make sure everything's working as it's supposed to. Typically, these assemblies take kind of a long time. So if this was a movie, I'd say this would be the part where an 80s style music montage of the assembly would take place. So let's cue the synthesizers and assemble this light. Alright, with the music montage of the assembly complete, let's get back to the build. We're going to jump on my table saw one last time today to cut the bending plywood to size before applying it to the bat and to the border. Just as I did with the bat, I'm going to add a little bit of blue painter's tape to the border of the background to see how the shadows will all be cast.
First, we gotta trim this guy to size, so we're gonna just kind of force it in here.
With the lights on, I can see that an 1.5 inch trim piece is going to hide just enough light to create the shadows I was looking for. Following the same process as earlier, we're going to use glue and pin nails to attach the trim pieces to the border of this light. As I previously mentioned, this bending plywood was very accommodating to the oval background shape. But when it came to applying it to the tighter curves around the bat shape, I did have to use multiple pieces of the bending plywood instead of one piece to make each curve. After doing this, I'd probably do it a little bit differently next time, but at the end of the day, it did do what I wanted it to do, which was to create a border around the bat shape, not only to hide the LED lights and wires, but also to create the shadows I was looking for. It really just makes it look that much better too, because it gives it the depth and a cool 3D look. So we're closing in on what I would consider the third act of this build. So if you've stuck around with me for this long, then show the Dark Knight some love and hit the like button on this video.
So now this is too tight for this stuff to bend.
With the bending plywood not being as flexible as I'd hoped, I really had no choice but to make a bunch of tiny pieces instead of one piece. And with all these tiny pieces, I had to individually glue and nail them all into place around the edge of the bat. It was a rather long and tedious process, but necessary to get the design that I was envisioning. I would 100% not do it this way if I were to do this from scratch again. Rather, I think I would make the border for the bat shape on my CNC. I would make a few pieces of just the border so I could later glue them together to get the depth and form that 3D shape. That would have been so much easier and less time consuming. That's just another reason why the best life lessons are the ones that you learn from your own personal experiences. But it doesn't hurt to learn from the trial and errors of others as well, so you can skip some of these pitfalls. That's at least what I tell my boys anyways.
Basically, any of these gaps, anywhere the seams are, we'll fill those all with Bondo.
With all the bending plywood attached and giving the bat shape its border, I'm going to bust out some Bondo. We're going to use this Bondo to hide all of the seams and the tighter curves of the bat shape. When it's all said and done, you won't even be able to tell that the tighter curves are made of multiple pieces of bending plywood. That's one of the beauties of Bondo. You can use it to take more unconventional shapes and turn them into smoother and more desirable surfaces. Just like one of Batman's villains, Clayface, the Bondo adapts to disguise any imperfections on any given project. I always thought Clayface was one of Batman's cooler villains growing up, and I hope the rumors are true that he might play a supporting role in the upcoming sequel to The Batman starring Robert Pattinson. But I think that's one of the key reasons why Batman is the GOAT when it comes to superheroes. He has some of the most interesting and colorful villains. My two personal favorites are the Riddler and of course the Joker. But who's your favorite Batman villain?
Look at this snot rocket of a Batman signal. Whoa! Just caked in Bondo.
Once I put it in here, that light cannot come back out.
Bondo has two parts, the filler and the hardener. The more hardener you use, the faster it'll dry. If you're not careful, it's going to dry way too fast. I've ruined many different batches of Bondo by adding too much hardener. This is just something that you're going to have to take a little bit of trial and error for you to get the right ratio for your project that you're using it for. While the Bondo is drying on the bat, I added a couple screws to the border. This is going to allow access to the LED light strip if it ever needs to be repaired or replaced. Now, let's get back to the Bondo. We're going to use a little bit more to fill in all the pores on the bat shape of this light to make it appear as smooth as possible. After a few minutes of allowing the bat to dry, I brought out my sander and I started smoothing out all the imperfections in the Bondo. And let me tell you, I'm not a fan of sanding wood, but after sanding all this Bondo, I would sand wood all day. Sanding always seems to be the part of the building process where I wish I could fast forward so I can get on to the next part of the project. I almost have to motivate myself just to keep going and not stop. Let me just take a moment and envision how incredible the final result is going to be. Yeah, that helps. Let's keep moving forward because we still have a little ways to go. With all the Bondo sanded smooth from the surfaces of this light, we're going to shift gears and pass this light on to my professional painter buddy, Andy. Now, I wasn't there to experience the painting part of this light, but my cameraman Nick went to document the painting portion of this build. I do have a little bit of experience watching Andy go through the steps while he's trying to create the perfect finish though. Typically, the first step in any painting process is wiping it all down to making it as dust-free as possible. You want a clean and dust-free surface to make sure that the paint and primer are going to properly adhere to whatever project you're working on. After the surface has been cleaned, Andy's going to use a 2-part epoxy primer that's going to create an abrasion and moisture-resistant surface. After the primer has been mixed, he went ahead and applied 2 to 3 coats to create a smooth and sandable surface. Priming is an essential step to finishing any project that requires paint. This is going to ensure proper adhesion of the paint, which is going to help prevent peeling and chipping, allowing this piece to look fresh and pristine for years to come. So Andy has been a professional painter for over 25 years. He's worked on everything from the likes of cars, guitars, and any sort of custom art piece that you could possibly imagine. So he knows all the ins and outs on how to make this process as fast and efficient as possible, giving him the edge that he needs to make this a speedy process. The paint job is really what makes this look so dang cool. Its sleek look in combination with the vibrant LED lights only help enhance the shape of the large stylized bat with its outstretched wings, sharp edges cutting through the darkness like a beacon of justice. I might be getting ahead of myself, but it does kind of make me want to rewatch all the Batman movies and TV series again. I'll have to have a Batman marathon with my boys sometime this summer, and if they don't want to join their old man, then so be it. I'll just have to call it my sidekick and YouTube partner in crime, Nick. I know he'll be down. I was really looking forward to using this gold leafing technique for the background of this light. You pretty much just take these very thin sheets of gold and apply them to your desired surface. I applied some adhesive first to the background surface, and then you just layered the gold sheets until I covered the whole area that needed it. Then you apply a top coat that goes over the gold leaf, which is a layer of protection. Just like Batman is a watchful protector of Gotham City. So why is Batman everyone's favorite hero? And why has he captured the imagination and hearts of our culture? Batman's relatable. Batman connects to us because he speaks to our problems and the challenges we all face as a human race. Batman symbolizes that good should always try to triumph over evil. He's a symbol of hope, a shining light on a brighter future, an inspiration to look up to. You don't have to throw on an awesome costume to make a positive impact on this world. You can have anything that you want in this life as long as you're willing to fight for it every day. Something that I've learned is to never give up, even in your darkest hour. Just keep going, because that's what Batman would do. Be sure to watch this video linked on screen next so you can experience the origin story firsthand of how this billionaire came knocking on my shop door to build this Batman LED light.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Batman.